So Scrum for Warfighters is an adaptation of a set of tools that have worked really well in the civilian world for getting things done more quickly and making sure that the things you're getting done are the important things and slowly shearing away the things that don't matter as much.
All right. So how do you sign up for the course?
You sign up for the course through your command. So the Center for Adaptive Warfighting is the wrapper for all of the courses that we offer. Scrum for Warfighters is one of these. We offer it once a month. There are 20 seats in every one of these courses, and at the moment we're having MCC SSS, 2nd MLG, and 2nd MIG send us students. They figure out how to allocate those seats. So a bunch of different ways of thinking about that. Here's one of them, right? If you're running a civilian company, you have your users to keep you honest, right? If you're spending time on things that don't matter to them, you're going to find out about it really quickly. When we're in theater, we have opposing forces to keep us honest. If we're not doing things that matter, that make a difference, if we're not executing well, we find out about it really quickly. What happens in garrison if we're not focusing on those things, or we're not doing everything that we can to make sure that we are continually getting better? How do we even measure whether or not we're getting better? Scrum's a system for doing that, right? If it helps us to measure what's happening, what we need to get done, make sure that we're tracking it all in a way that's totally visible and that everybody in our unit can see, understand, and be accountable for. It makes sure that all tasks in size and in scope and in timing are available to everybody so that anybody can start pulling and executing, and it gets the whole team on board for figuring out how much really can we do every week. Let's make sure that we do that amount. Let's protect ourselves from outside interference on these things. Let's constantly be revisiting as we go through the week the things that we committed to do this week from our backlog and figure out how we can do them better, faster, with a minimum of effort. And every single week you do iteration to figure out what do we do, how do we do it, how do we do it better, how's everybody feeling about that, how do we take better care of our team, are there priorities that we aren't visiting that we need to be, and we need to have a set space for them in the schedule and our ways of understanding and our approaches. Scrum capitalizes, builds all of that into one big set of tools that you can put in, adapt totally to your circumstances, but if you ask the questions that Scrum teaches you to ask, teaches you how to ask, gives you a schedule for asking, and you do it with your full team of 3 to 9 people, you're going to find that you see something like a 5, maybe a 10, maybe a 20 times increase in how much you can get done every week. Those are numbers that are pretty common for teams that implement Scrum, both in the fleet and out in the world. Of work and of knowledge and of experience on Scrum as a tool out in the civilian world. We're only just now adopting it. The course that we're at the moment is the first ever Scrum for Warfighters course in the Marine Corps, and to my knowledge actually anywhere in the DoD. A few people have been picking it up themselves because there is so much instruction and knowledge available in the world. This is, let me deviate a little bit here to say that being a Scrum Master, somebody who knows how to direct traffic on a Scrum team, enforce the rules, make sure everybody's being productive, is a certification that's available now in the civilian world. Probably $2,000 a head if you want to go out and get what's called a CSM, a commercial Scrum or a certified Scrum Master certification. This is free, right? And it's taught by somebody who's worked with the folks who actually invented Scrum out in the real world and is working to help adapt it, not just to the commercial world, but to the service context. We are serving, we're helping people, we all have customers and stakeholders and people who depend on us. So there's no reason why that framework should be tremendously different in its fundamental insights, but it needs to be applied to our own context. So the military Scrum Master certification, which we'll offer, will be indistinguishable from the civilian one. You often see salaries of $90,000 to $150,000 a year for people who have a certified Scrum Master line in their resume and can do it well. So this course qualifies you to put that on your resume when you leave the service, should you ever leave the service, and provides you all the same amount of things that produce that kind of value out in the civilian world. So huge body of knowledge, courses and certifications already available, the Scrum Guide is available commonly. All kinds of different companies will teach it to you, and now very slowly, and we think starting to get faster, there are going to be people in the DoD who can teach it to each of us and make it possible for us to implement and have a little bit of mentorship as we do it in the Marine Corps. So the benefits of this course, let's go from easy to a little more complicated, right? So benefits of this course include, first of all, being able to say, how much did we get done this week? Well, we got 3 units worth of things done. How much did we, a week later, how much did we get done? 5. How much did we get done the following week? 10. You can start to measure how much effort is required for the things that you do. And then you can not only tell yourself, but you can tell your team and you can tell your bosses, this is what we're able to accomplish in a given period. And as you chart that, you're starting to see things like this, usually, if you're doing Scrum really well. I mean, I would ask anybody who's listening, how often do we sit down and ask ourselves, how do you feel about how we did this week? It's a question you ask every week in Scrum. Why? And what can we do next week to make sure that it's better? Either because you didn't feel that good this week or because you noticed something that we could be doing better to make us more productive or happier or work better as a team. If we did only those 2 things, it would be totally worth doing. But it turns out that those are really good ways not only of improving how much we're doing, which is important, but also of making us feel more like a team and be more effective as a team as we do them. And also do better for the people we're supposed to be serving. Sometimes that's our Marines, right? How often have they heard from us? Does it take forever for their awards to go through? If they put a suggestion in the box, is it 6 months until they hear about it, if they hear about it at all? Or is it every single thing they put in the suggestion box gets addressed at an all-hands meeting once every single week? You're never going to have to wait more than 7 days to hear back about that. Scrum structures in stuff like that. It makes it clear that those are the choices that you're making. So if you want to take better care of your subordinates, provide better service to your superiors and to the units that you support, and take better care of yourself and of your unit writ large, this is a good system for making sure that you think about it purposefully and continually. What does innovation have to do with this course? So first of all, innovation, right? People use that word a lot, and they use it to mean many, many different things. We use it in a really particular way inside this course, right? And I want to distinguish between novelty, which is something that is new and hasn't been seen before in the world, right? Novelty, if you mash your hand on a keyboard, that's novel, right? You're going to get a whole bunch of semicolons and random consonants. Nobody's seen it before. Nobody cares, right? One step up from novelty is creativity. It's new, and it combines things in a way that is at the very least interesting, right? If we suggested that the CO sing us all lullabies every night so we could get a better night's sleep, wouldn't call it practical, but you haven't heard that suggestion before, right? And it combines things that we know in a way at least that's interesting. Innovation's the next step up. It's new, it's interesting, and it's going to make a difference for somebody, right? So we usually talk about that in terms of mission acceleration. Are we getting better at doing what we're supposed to do faster in ways that are more meaningful? If it doesn't make a difference to somebody on that level, we shouldn't be spending time on it. It's novel or it's creative, but it's nothing more than that. So when we say that we're figuring out how to innovate, we say that we're coming up with processes, perfecting processes that make it possible for us to solve problems that matter to somebody in a way that means something to the Marine Corps, right? And that can be as simple as taking better care of our Marines or better care of ourselves. It can be as complicated and central as increasing lethality when our units go out and do their work. But if we aren't constantly thinking critically about what we do, assessing how we could be doing it better, what isn't working, who it's working for, who it isn't working for, who really are the people we need to have in the room to have a full sense of its effectiveness and of the potential paths forward and what we can be doing to make it better. If we aren't doing all that stuff, we're not going to get better. We can't focus on improvement. We've been directed to do it by the Commandant. We've been directed to do it by the National Defense Strategy. Every piece of our doctrine is all about that, and we just need to always be trying out new tools for doing precisely that, which, as it happens, is exactly what Scrum is for. If you put in place the 3 roles and the 3 sets of tools and the 5 events that are all that Scrum requires and figure out how to perfect them at your unit, you will constantly be doing each of those things to innovate, to make things better in a way that matters. So second of all, Scrum is what's called an agile methodology, right? It's usually agile Scrum. It's Scrum because it's about the way that a rugby team moves down the field. The mass of gigantic human beings trying to kill each other and move a ball with them is called a Scrum, and they operate together wordlessly on the basis of practice and of understanding the role that each of them is meant to be occupying in that push against the other team's Scrum, right? It's agile because it has to do with constantly assessing and reacting to changes in your environment, right? And some of that is like, how do my actions affect the world? And some of that is what opportunities and threats and barriers is the universe throwing at me that I need to be alive to in order to be good at what I do, right? We live in a world that's changing faster than it ever has before. Planning processes that were built for a world in which you could plan to do something 10 years from now and execute on it flawlessly are not going to do so well in a world where the information environment changes overnight, the tools that are available to us change dramatically every 2 to 6 months. We need to be reacting quickly. And Agile was developed for the software world through the 80s and 90s, and after another 20 years of sharpening to help software, which can really easily and must, in order to survive in the market, do precisely that, move, change really quickly over time. And it's slowly spreading now from the software world as we recognize that the planning processes that had been used in software had been adopted from the manufacturing world. And they didn't work for software and they needed to change, but it turns out they actually don't work that well in the manufacturing or mission accomplishment worlds anymore either. They're outdated. If you've ever heard of Gantt charts or long-term PO&AMs, like, you can use those to build a carrier and they can be quite effective. But if what you're trying to do is to run a unit in a constantly shifting threat-centric environment, an opportunity-centric environment, you got to be pivoting a lot more quickly, and Agile methodologies are built to make that not only possible, but easy and maybe even inevitable and definitely effective. Okay, so I think of innovation as being the result of productive dissatisfaction. Something needs to be better, somebody knows it, and we figure out how to make that happen, right? If it doesn't resolve a dissatisfaction, it's probably not innovation, it's probably not solving a problem for somebody, right? So this course fits into 3 separate courses that we're offering through the Center for Adaptive Warfighting. The first one of them is Warfighter-Centered Design. It adapts a bunch of civilian techniques which are taught at Stanford, Harvard, Yale, large corporations around the country, and are central to understanding how to identify something that people need, and then to figure out what problem you're really solving for them, even though you've recognized that there's a problem there, like exactly what are its contours, and exactly what's going to solve that problem for them. Not what you think is, not you drew a conclusion when you went home and you designed something in your room and now you're going to sell it, but I have a thought about it, let me test it in front of this person. Let me see if I've really identified their problem, or if I'm still on just what I thought their problem was, right? How do I find people who have a problem? How do I figure out what that problem is? That's what Warfighter-Centered Design is about, with a side helping on top of it of how do I get my leadership involved in that? How do I tell them what I need in order to test those ideas? How do I brief that effectively in a way that makes sense in the Marine Corps and pushes a decision-ready proposal across the desk to my CO or the unit that I'm supporting, or even to your subordinates, right? Is this going to work for you? Does this answer the mail on the concern that you raised with me? How do I express this in a way that has me do all the work so that somebody else just has to say yes or no, and I can go out and test it, not necessarily by spending millions of dollars, but in the cheapest, fastest, easiest way that can falsify, can show that what I thought was wrong, or can show that it's right and is worth investing way more time and energy in. So Warfighter-Centered Design is problem identification and customer identification. How do I find the things that need solving, and how do I get close to the people who really have those problems in order to figure out what they need from me. Cool, okay, now that I have those hypotheses, how do I execute on that? That's what Scrum is about, right? This is what it takes, not only to execute on those problems, but to make my unit run better, focus on the things that work, take those constant inputs from my users, from my subordinates, the units I support, from my superiors, capitalize them into what I do, and adjust the way that I spend my time and my team spends their time so that I'm spending it on what matters to them, and not on the things that I thought when I took this job were going to be the things that I was supposed to do. Always be refining, always be doing it better, run the team so that the whole team can contribute their ingenuity and their drive and their mastery and their sense of purpose as Marines to what it is that you do together, run it smoothly, and maybe also have a little bit of fun as you do it, right? So that's the execution portion. And then on top of it, Lean Startup is a program that we're stealing wholeheartedly with great sincerity from the National Security Administration. They stole it from the National Science Foundation. Both of them adopted it to their own context. Both of them based it on how startups do business out in the world. Turns out if you're a big corporation, what your job is to execute, right? You know basically what it is you make. You know who you make it for. You know how you like to make it. You can be optimizing that. You use techniques like CPI or Lean Six Sigma to make that happen. If you're a startup, or another way of saying that is, if you're somebody who operates in uncertainty, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? How do I do this better? Who do I do this for? Your job is to test hypotheses, not to execute on something really well understood, right? How do you rapidly, cheaply, at a minimum of cost outside of the monetary realm, test what you think might be right? How do you find the people who can tell you whether or not it's correct? Because you're solving a need for them. Remember, we're centered around problems here, right? It's not a problem if nobody has it. How do you find those people and ask them, does this work? Does this work? Does this work? That one does work. Okay, that's interesting. How about if I do this a little more expensively and a little more on point for the problem that you're telling me that you have? Does this solve it even better? Cool. Does this solve it better? Great. We've got an answer. We can get to everybody who has your problem now. Now we can send it out to the world, right? You can see how in the commercial sector, that's something that's really helpful for running a market, right? We found a product. Now we find all the people who need that product. Now we perfect it, and we constantly iterate, constantly improve it to make sure that it keeps getting better. In the Marine Corps world, if we're trying to find new ways to use drones and software and reorganize our units so that they're more effective and they solve emerging problems out in an uncertain world, we can do the same thing, right? We solve it in one place, we find the problem, we find the people who have it, we iterate, we hypothesize, we test until we have solved that problem, and then we find all the other people who have that problem, and we give them the solution that they found. That's how innovation happens, that's how adaptation happens, that's how we satisfy the directives we've been given from above to make the Marine Corps a better place. So every one of these courses, maybe it's the right course, maybe it's not, maybe some other course is going to be better, maybe we'll hear from the people we're presenting this to, it's not solving any problems for them, cool, we exit, we move on to something else, but those basic questions are the right questions. How do we find new problems and people who have them? How do we come up with hypotheses for what might make it better? How do we execute on those hypotheses? And then how do we build a huge program that scales that up so that everybody has access to it? If we can answer those questions, we can make the Marine Corps better for ourselves, for our Marines, for the units and people that we support and take care of, and for the lethality and country protection for which we're relied. So we want to see Marines coming to these, we want two things, right? One, we want Marines coming to this course, right? We can't figure out what works if we can't find problems and solve them, or if we don't have the opportunity to do that, and nobody knows the problems that a unit faces better than Marines from that unit. So if we get Marines in and they can learn these ways to find and identify problems and test solutions to them and then to execute on them, they're going to solve it, right? And we need feedback from those Marines after they go to their units. Every one of these courses is 2 to 3 days of in-class and then a practical application back at the unit. And then we want to see the after action and the concrete measurement of whether it made a difference, right? And we get feedback from that. So we need that from those Marines. And then we need their commands to give them the time, trust, and top cover they need in order to test these methodologies back at their units. And then once we figure out what's working, we need the commands to begin to figure out how to say, hey, who's somebody who knows how to find and rectify problems here? All right, tag corporal, tag captain, tag lieutenant colonel, you're in on this thing. Take a few weeks, figure out how to apply the tools that you've been given in order to solve this thing, and come tell me about it. Or if we don't have a particular problem in mind, maybe I'm a CO and I want to figure out how to make my unit better. Who's got ideas? I'm going to book out an hour every Thursday. It's going to be pitches from any Marine who can say the following words to me. I can do this better and here's how. Right? And then we're going to figure out how to action that. Right? The answers, those proposals, those pitches are going to get better as we start to trust our Marines ever more. There's always going to be more space for that. And also give our Marines tools to come up with those good pitches based on finding good problems for people who have problems that matter and then figuring out in effective ways how to solve them. There's a scientific method for that. There are tools out in the civilian world. That's what we're offering in these courses, and that's what we're going to start to see as Marines fully trained in innovation head back to their units, and as units who understand how to employ innovative and innovatively trained Marines start to use them.